meeting to order. Let the record reflect that Mrs. Bush will be absent tonight and Mr. Renner will join us in about 15 minutes, he thought. So if you'd please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, are there any modifications to the agenda from the board members? Seeing none, I'll go into my president's report. It is fairly lengthy. There's been a lot of things to do between the last regular board meeting and this one. A couple highlights include I was able to visit Robertson School during their intercession with our year-round calendar. Had a great tour from the principal and Dr. Hackenworth and Ms. Jones, and got to talk to several of the students about the projects that they were doing, and just really, really great engagement. And it was nice to see that number of children enrolled in typically what would be equivalent to summer school. So, you know, I was asking some of the children, now, would you typically go to summer school? And they're like, no. So, I mean, I think we're going to see certainly increased enrollment in those intercessions, and that's only going to serve to help serve our students well. I did that, attended the MSBA Board of Directors meeting representing Springfield, and then also the Kansas City, St. Louis, and Springfield Public Schools get together regularly, a few times a year, to talk about common issues. Dr. Ritter, Mr. Lee, and I were in Jefferson City last week. Spent a lot of time talking about community schools and St. Louis's partnership with the city there, talking about Kansas City and St. Louis's efforts in early childhood, which is equivalent to what we're doing or similar. Back in October, Dr. Ritter and I were invited to the Governor's Mansion for dinner as a thank you for our support of the sustaining the veto for House Bill 253. It was a very nice evening, and it was nice to hear the governor speak of the efforts certainly throughout the state, and also to hear a governor who is so pro-public education. I think that that's something that we can all be very assured of. Many of you know that for the past several days and continuing tonight, we have public forums going on in the community related to our superintendent search. I'd like to publicly thank all of our staff who have played a role in facilitating those, making sure that the plans got made and publicized. We've had good attendance, and there will be a survey that if you haven't had a chance to participate in one of those forums, there will be a survey that will be on our website available, I believe, tomorrow at noon. Is that right? Okay, so hopefully you'll have your input there. Let's see. Got to speak to the principals last week at their principals meeting, talking about the search. And then last night I participated in the Every Child Promise forums that they're holding throughout the city, able to see some of the initial proposals coming from that group, and certainly a lot of emphasis on early childhood education and partnering with the school system and making sure that children get a good start in their education. But you know what that means for us as a district and working with our community partners, particularly in staffing and funding, I think will be an interesting discussion to have moving forward. And then just this afternoon, I guess 4 of us participated in a joint meeting with the City Council and staff, county commissioners and staff, and school board and our staff. These are meetings that we've had similar kinds of meetings since I've been on the board, and I think with a change of leadership at the county and city, that those had kind of gone by the wayside. So we've agreed to start meeting regularly and talk about topics of common concern. And we did have a discussion today about the city's crossing guards program. And I think those of us who participated felt like we were able to offer maybe some possible solutions that the city may not have considered in terms of the management of that program. So hopefully moving forward we'll be able to continue to be supportive of their efforts to manage that program in a way that's effective for our students and our community. So I know several of you have been out and about, so if you have anything since the last meeting I'd like to report. Yeah.
I think I mentioned the last meeting that I attended, the Studi Alternative first quarter graduation. So that was a very neat event. I also participated in the Walkable Neighborhood Project in the Robertson community. I walked 16 blocks, which was a lot of fun, and to see the neighborhood and talk to some of the people in the neighborhood. I learned a lot about sidewalks and crossings and things like that. Also, I had the opportunity. It was so much fun to go to Delaware for their Red Ribbon Week, and I got to judge doors that the students had decorated. My favorite was one that said, "We do hugs, we don't do drugs." That was a lot of fun. And then I served on a panel for the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce Good Morning Springfield, and my part of that was to aspect of that work was to share the trip to Nashville, the Chamber leadership trip to Nashville, and my thoughts on what we saw there in terms of education. And then I had another great day with spending time with the students from Wolf at one of their field trips, and they were studying forest and river ecosystems and adaptation. So that was great fun to spend time with those students. That was an all-day event, and it's just amazing to see the students learning in the field and a practical application of their learning. So,
anything else?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You talk about the regional meeting?
Nope.
Okay. Well,
I'll
several of us did attend the MSBA regional meeting that was in Ozark 2 weeks ago, I guess, and there's some good presentations, short ones from a couple of schools, but the most interesting presentation was regarding the effect of tax cuts on not just public education, but on economic growth and development, and how some people feel that to have economic growth and development, you have to cut taxes, and many studies have shown that the opposite is true. If you're not providing good infrastructure includes public education, that irresponsible tax cut can be detrimental to not just education, but also growth and development and economic activity. So I hope that that if a tax issue comes up, we can provide that information to our representatives.
I was just going to, as Frederick reminded me of when she said Red Ribbon Week, as Elmer Fudd would say. I hate that.
can't say it either.
Our Rotary Club and the Don't Meth With Us program was, well, in October we were in every fifth grade class, and every high school student heard a speaker last week. David Parnell and my senior moment, the second one left me now. But we hit, I don't know how many, that's what, 2,500 fifth graders and 12,000 high school, or 7,500 high school students with the message. And it's not a soft sell by any means or holding anything back. It was hit pretty hard. And we heard a lot of comments, most of them good, some of them shock more than anything. But, I mean, that goes on every year in October, that we hit every fifth grader, and then we'll do the same thing in February with every seventh grader. So they get hit 3 times in that career on basically drugs and meth. And it's kind of an eye-opening experience to hear some of the fifth graders talk about it, their experiences of what they've seen and lived. And, I mean, it's sad, but very eye-opening. But it's a good opportunity to get in the schools and do that.
A couple of weeks ago, or last week, Annie Bush and I hosted Congressman Long, who came to Mark Twain Elementary for a tour. And Stacy Manlove?
Yeah, Stacy's right. Wonderful principal.
Stacy guided the tour and was great. Really informative to the congressman about, where Twain was with its free and reduced and what the challenges were as a result of that. Talked a lot about mobility, which I think he was pretty shocked by, the fluctuation in their number of students just because of mobility this early in the school year. So had a good tour of the school and provided the congressman some good information about kind of some of the challenges we face, and he did talk a little bit about Common Core, and he mentioned that he'd had people call him about that and wanting him to come out against Common Core, and he talked to Peter Hershend and was set straight
Yes,
on
I bet he
that.
was.
So that was interesting that he mentioned that. So
Great. And I know, speaking of Common Core, I know Mrs. Bush, on her own dollar, went to a summit or a convention or a conference or symposium that was really sponsored by people that were anti-Common Core, and I think she was just really interested in hearing that message. And then I think she also accompanied Dr. Frederick on the Wolf field trip. So thank you, all of you, for the extra time. I know a lot of times it's people think it's just the meetings, but there's a lot more that goes on, and actually that's where the fun is a lot of times. So appreciate all your time there. So with that, Dr. Ritter.
Have official enrollment data that as of the last Wednesday in September, and you'll note that we saw an increase of about 80 students from a year ago, progressing up. And then down below that chart, you'll see the numbers as far as ethnicity is concerned. The mobility is unbelievable. I was with Sonia Anderson this afternoon. She went to visit Williams, and they talked about how one class had a total turnaround. And so it's just a constant thing. And so for us to capture these numbers, that it changes from day to day, week to week. Down at the bottom, you see the student dropout data. So these are all official data that is recorded at DESE. The dropout is from last year, of course, and it's official at the end of September, which includes summer school and things like that, completion of summer school. So anyway, that's for your information. Another thing I want to mention.
Dr. Excuse me, what had we anticipated the increase to be this year?
About, what was it? About 350 is what we were anticipating, projected.
Do we have any idea why it was significantly lower?
I think, like I said, at the beginning of the year, we were looking at pretty good numbers, and then the mobility changed. For instance, at one site at Jeffries, they were at 600, and they're at about 560, 540 right now. Another one would be Westport. And so we're not quite sure. They don't know what happened there. And so I think it's all tied to mobility.
So they're leaving the district, basically.
Yes, either leaving the district, leaving the state, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. So tomorrow the numbers may be different. So anyway, another thing I want to share with you is we did get a grant today. I received a call. Kathy received a call about 4 o'clock, 3:30, that we received a grant, a USDA grant. With my background, I'm excited whenever I get anything from the USDA. Anyway, it's for $44,259. And what's really significant about this is that it's a grant for better nutrition, and it's basically where we buy locally fruits and vegetables and raise it here, and then we use it in 3 of our schools. And it's going to cover the cost for that. And the 3 schools are Robertson, Roundtree, and Jefferson. I can't remember whose kids are in them. Jeffries. Jefferson. That was a slip. But anyway, I don't remember whose kids are in Roundtree. But anyway, those are the 3 that that are going to be, and there's two districts in the state that received this grant, and the other one was Bolivar. And so, anyway, those are the two. Last thing I want to mention, this is always my favorite time of year, theater in our schools. And you already missed two of them. At Central, they did In the Heights, which is really Washington Heights in New York. It's kind of a melodrama. And then we had Parkview do Hairspray.
I went to Hairspray last week with my daughters, so I had fun. Very good.
Good. Did it help you? No. And then we have. I couldn't pass that out.
That was a setup.
I was going to say that was
No real need there.
I'm getting there. Yeah. Anyway, this weekend, November 20th through the 24th, is Monty Python's Spamalot at Kickapoo. And then Glendale's do Fiddler on the Roof, and that's going to be a neat production. That's November 21st through the 23rd. And then Hillcrest is doing Snoopy. And that's going to be, they do a good job with Charlie Brown a couple years ago, now Snoopy. And, of course, Mark heads that up. And so anyway, if you get a chance, take advantage and give them a call ahead of time so they can give you some tickets and put you in front row. All right? And so that's really all I have at this time. Thank you.
great. I've got a couple other things, but I think it will be better under, well, let me do this one under a president's report. We do, the board has new computers. And I think this is the first time since we went to a paperless board. So this is just our second generation. But I would like to take this time to say thank you to our local HP service provider, ISG Technology Incorporated, and their representative to our district, Mr. Bob Birch, for their donation of these 7 new laptops for our board to use. They had donated laptops to the board over 5 years ago for the implementation of our board doc software and have graciously replaced them today. So thank you to ISG Technology, the partnership that we have with them. So.
I don't get one, Rick. Oh,
Sorry, Norm. Okay.
driving a Studebaker.
Mrs. Luton. Well, if anybody had ever seen his Geostorm, this computer looks a lot better than that. But okay, we're gonna.
All right.
This is your lifestyle.
Yeah.
I know.
This meeting is digressing quickly, but are there any speakers? Okay. We will move on to information items, and those are our OSRs. So with that, Dr. Ritter.
At this time, Joe, if you'd come forward. Really excited about what we're going to discuss tonight as far as the OSRs, not the OSRs themselves, but the state of the district. I think it's really a neat summary, exciting summary, and it's something that the board needs to get their hands around, and Cabinet's already starting to have the conversation with it. So Joe's done an awesome job with it. So Joe, take it from here.
Thanks. Good evening. Tonight in our ongoing system review, we have 3 sections of the report. The first one is the regular monthly summary of each ongoing system review. The second is the state of the district. And the third is at a differentiated look at the ongoing systems review and possibilities with that. So tonight we have custodial services, guidance and counseling, and school police. So I'll ask Mr. Owens to join me. The process will be the same tonight, about 2 to 3 minutes with the program lead talking about changes from last year, and then we'll flip to the KSM and open up for questions.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Ritter. It's my night to present to you the ongoing systems review for custodial services. Nice thing, I think I've got good news, is a lot of our opportunities for improvement last year became strengths this year. Thank you to budget proposals and approvals, so I thank you for that. Basically, with the space code implementation for custodial services, we were able to not increase a lot of head count, even with our increasing square footage, and still maintain the quality in our inspections and our what the classroom and what the site administrators are asking for us to do. Budget was approved for the 4 additional FTEs for the high schools because of all the activities and all the athletic events and so forth, and they are busy this time of year. Thank goodness football is basically over, so we get some of those people back now to do projects during the next quarter. And then there was a request also for an opportunity for improvement. We hadn't had a budget increase in our supply and material costs in our budget for, well, supplies and materials since 2007. And so we did get one in there, and it has made a huge difference. The one key opportunity for improvement that we still have this year was, left over from last year, was we asked for an increase in the maintenance and repair budget for a lot of our custodial equipment. We've invested a lot of capital money into that equipment, and it takes PMs, preventive maintenance, parts, and materials to maintain that. When I came here, just an example, in 2001, we had 22 auto scrubbers, Zambonis, whatever people know them as, and we now have over 120. So, you know, it's great. That's how we're gaining our efficiencies, and that's how we're getting the work done with the same number of people doing more square footage. That being said, not getting the money, part of what we need to do then is how can we be more efficient, more effective? So we've enhanced and we've updated our training for our custodial supervisors, who have zone supervisors, 5 of them. The district's split up in 5 zones, and they are the first responders for equipment issues. Instead of calling the service deck, you know, when you've got the service fee, the trip fee, and all that kind of stuff, we're literally saving between $100 and $200 to go out and do a minor adjustment versus calling in the tech. So some of that is already happening. We're already seeing the difference, and there'll be more reports on that as we progress. The new opportunity for improvement, since I ran out, I only had one left. Yeah, that's a good thing. We did, back in 2006, we did an employee survey, and we did another one, I think, in 2008. And it's when the MBA came through and did our mini audit for the Malcolm Baldrige systems. That's one thing that they asked, well, how often are you really doing it? I said, well, I had planned on doing it every 2 years, and they said that would be great. 4 years gets it out there a little bit too far. You can have a lot of changeover in supervision and management of that stuff. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to incorporate that into an electronic version and hopefully have that done by Christmas this year, winter break this year. So that's where we're at with opportunities for improvement.
Okay, any questions?
Are there any questions of Mr. Owen? Andy?
I'm assuming the answer is yes, but when somebody rents space or uses our school, I know Mr. Bishop's talked about giving a true cost to the district of what that is. Is the time spent by the custodial staff included in that true cost? The extra cleaning, extra setup, take down, tear down?
Yes, when it's a full-blown rental, a contractual rental from an outside facility or outside entity, we do have a flat fee to cover custodial costs. That covers overtime fee plus materials and that kind of stuff. When it's an internal usage at night, athletics, those type of things, then custodial splits 50% of that cost typically, if it's involving our students and it's a district event.
And the only other comment I guess I would make, and I think I've said this before, but I'm always surprised and it makes me feel good when principals and teachers and kids refer to their custodian as just as part of that staff, and it's really, I think, increases the education environment when everybody's pulling the same way, and you hear that at school after school, which is I think refreshing. So.
Mr. Lee?
This is more of a comment than a question, but and I really appreciate it because a lot of times you get, when you start outsourcing responsibility or service, you sort of lose that, what I would call a partnership, which has not happened here. I mean, it's just like, and that's what one thing I've been impressed with, as Mr. Hosmer talked about. I mean, it's just like a strategic partnership that you got, and I appreciate your guys' desire to continually improve and make things better and do things the right way because it's the right thing to do. And I appreciate that. It doesn't always happen when you let somebody else do it.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that. I mean, it's such a seamless transition, seamless line that nobody even knows. And that's, to me, that's pretty incredible process, particularly with the customer service response you get, the satisfaction you got. Rarely have I ever heard a concern about that. And the buildings always look great.
Anything else? Yeah, I would say from the time that I've been on the board till now, in terms of the the quality of custodial service and the cleanliness of the facilities has just really improved greatly. So the partnership that we have with Aramark is, like Mr. Lee said, truly a valuable partnership. So thank you.
A lot of it does go back to the frontline employees in the sites. They take that ownership. They take the responsibility, respect. I got a lot of good people doing a lot of great work.
Thanks so much. Oh,
Right,
go ahead.
right.
Well, I just
Frederick has
have a quick comment that whenever I was at Delaware recently, and they had all decorated their doors, and it was really interesting because when I walked in, there was a lady coming down the hall, and she asked me if I was there to judge the doors, and I said sure, and she said, "Don't miss mine." And I said, "Which room are you?" And she said, "Well, I'm the custodian, but I did my door as well." So it's really neat. They're a very important part of that school.
Rod, you do work for us, so
Yes.
just wanted to kind of say that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have guidance and counseling service with Ms. Rhonda Mammon.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to report to you some really good news, I think. When I was standing up here last January and giving you my report, I hopefully was building a case based on some data that we collected that we had a need for additional counseling FTE to restore what we had lost in previous years and also to account for the increased enrollment that we've had. And thankfully, you approved the addition of 5.25 additional counselor FTE, along with, even though they're not officially part of our department, we do have some additional student support services with our school-based clinicians, the 5 school-based clinicians. So that, to me, is a highlight of our year. Of course, I did list that as one of our strengths because I do firmly believe that we are moving in the right direction. We're able to do more of the proactive, preventative work. I've already heard anecdotally comments from principals and counselors about what a difference it's made to have a full-time counselor, even in some of our smaller buildings, when students don't decide when to have a crisis or when they need someone, when they need to be out of the classroom with support. And it's so important for them to have that person in the building, not only to support the teacher, but that student individually. So we are very thankful and appreciate your support of our request for that. That being said, I did also put in an opportunity for improvement that we need to continue to evaluate that. We still have some schools that do not have a full-time counselor that really need that additional support. We had to make some tough decisions this year about where to place that FTE. And so I hope that as we move forward, we're still able to continue to look at that and fill the need in some of the other schools. One of the other things that I'd like to mention on what we're really focusing on this year to kind of change the direction, not change the direction. The counseling program has always had a career development component, but this year we are really emphasizing to the counselors in our professional learning the importance of knowing what our role is in implementing Common Core, as well as encouraging them to get on board intentionally with the college and career counseling components. And that starts with kindergarten or pre-K, if need be, in some of the schools. We're working very hard at creating that culture among all the students, how important it is to connect their learning to their future goals, and providing lots of activities to do that. So I ask all of the counselors this year to implement action plans that at each of their sites to address the college readiness measures. And they had to come up with 3 different strategies and activities that they've not implemented before, and we're going to be monitoring those throughout the year to see what a difference those make. So those are really the things that I wanted to highlight for you tonight, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there questions? Dr. Breeder?
It seems like on the on your chart, a lot of the things that are below where you want them to be involve high school level. Is that a factor of the counselors trying to do scheduling and counseling and college career readiness programs? Is it staffing issues at the high schools that keep those numbers down?
I think it's a combination of all of those. I think that much of what affects the percentage of students taking the ACT affects the entire school. Or I mean, it's a responsibility of all staff, not just the counselors. I do think that counselors obviously can encourage students to take one of those college interest tests. They also need to encourage them to be looking at some type of post-secondary education. That's definitely their role. But I also think that all staff need to be on board with that, and that's what we're looking at with the whole College and Career Readiness Initiative, and encouraging everybody in the school to get on board with that.
Are the counselors still the ones that do the majority of the class scheduling too in high
Yes.
schools? And has that ever been looked at in terms of, is that primary role for them? Is that
We look at it every year. We've had many discussions about how we can add more support for that in terms of clerical. A lot of what they have to do is more of a clerical role, and of course we would like to see that minimized somewhat, but how we're able to do that hasn't really totally been determined, because of it needs to be done. Somebody needs to do it, and so during certain parts of the year, a high percentage of their job is involved with scheduling.
Mr. Hasvers?
To the right, it's the OSR 2012-2013. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what's the 2013-2014?
That's the current data for this OSR cycle.
Okay. So the percent of 12th grade students taking the ACT is 63.8% as of today?
As of last year.
At the end, the 12th graders last year, of last year's 12th graders.
Okay, so that should be 2012-2013.
It's the OSR cycle for 13-14.
But that data
Well,
is
yeah.
data at the end of the
That
year.
is from the last year.
That's from 2000, and then
2012-13 school year.
It confused me
to
too.
the right, the 73.6. Where is that from?
That's from 11-12.
Okay.
So it runs a year
Okay.
behind for
All
some
right.
of the measures,
All right.
because that's the most current data.
I guess that, and maybe you can talk to me about that, because if you look at 12th grade students taking the ACT is down from the year before to last year. Percentage of graduates enrolled in a post-secondary educational training program is down from 12 to 13. And percentage of 8th graders completing the personal plan of study is down from 12 to 13. Can you talk to me about that and why we're seeing not only still in the red, but reductions from the previous year?
I think for the ACT particularly, that we last year for the first time began encouraging students to take one of the 4 assessments that are counted on our MSIP-5, one of our indicators, which would include the ASVAB, the Compass, ACT, or SAT. And so some of the students, that particular data doesn't take into consideration, and I think that for my next OSR, I really want to include the other 4 assessments, because I think that will give us a better picture of if we're meeting that indicator on MSIP-5. But as far as why it's down, I really can't answer that. We didn't really have a strong initiative to encourage that last year. That's just the data we collected. But this year we definitely are taking some steps to really focus on that and to encourage students to take one of those 4 assessments. As far as the personal plan of study is concerned, I was a little bit taken aback by that, because when the 8th grade counselors have been very good about making sure that all the students have at least started their portfolio and at least started the plan, and when I checked the data in Missouri Connections, did not indicate that we had as high a percentage, and that's something that I'm really trying to check into and determine why that went down, and we've had that discussion. Because that's now in board policy that all of our students need to do that by the end of 8th grade to start that plan, and so we really need to beef that up and make sure they're all doing it.
Mr. Lee.
My understanding is we pay for the ACT for free and reduced lunch one time, right?
We don't, but it is
Well,
paid for.
it's paid for.
It is paid for.
Do you find that as being an incentive? I mean, is that working? Do kids on free and reduced lunch take that because it's paid for by the state?
I don't think they automatically pay for it unless they have a reason to take it. If they are an A+ qualifier, they really need to take it. I don't think that necessarily that's an incentive, although it is something that we promote for the students and encourage them to do that. But I think if we looked at the data to see which ones of our students are actually on free and reduced lunch, we'd still see a fairly low percentage of those students who are taking the ACT.
But we have a fairly low percentage of free and reduced in high school that turn in the forms. I'm sorry.
True.
That turn in the forms to do that. So I didn't know if that incentive was helping.
We actually do have some other funding sources too for students to take the ACT, even if they don't qualify for free and reduced.
Has there ever been any discussion with OTC? Because I know a lot, I think that's probably the primary institution of higher education where the majority of our students enroll. Has there ever been any talk with them about requiring the ACT, even if they don't require a certain score to matriculate, that they would at least require that the ACT be taken? Has there ever been any discussion with them? And
Not that I've been a part of. I'm not aware of that. They use the Compass for placement, and so that's an ACT product, and so I think that is their main concern, that they're placed appropriately in the level of course that they need, and so that's what they use. So typically the community colleges have not required the ACT.
well, and Dr. Ritter, is it my understanding that this area of the adequate preparation for post-secondary opportunities is where we lost a lot of our points on the MSIP?
Yes, so. We missed, the 90%.
So I guess, what I'm hearing from the discussion tonight, that this might be an area that we'd like to hear back on about. I mean, you talked about some ideas, the action plan that you'd asked
Right.
High school counselors to implement. It sounds like maybe there might be some interest in having some further discussion. The other thing I'm interested in knowing is, you talked about anecdotal evidence, but, just the real impact. I think this goes back to Mr. Renner's concerns when we were approving funding for school-based clinicians, but, what is the hard data that what are they impacting,
And we do have an evaluation plan in place that we'll share when we get it finalized that does have hard data attached to it.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, Mr.
Yes.
Renner.
Is this just this percent of 12th graders taking the ACT? That to me doesn't mean anything. They just took it. That doesn't mean they're prepared.
Right.
So I think that whole thing doesn't even make sense to me. I mean, now maybe that comes from the state, but just because they take a test, we can get everybody. We can have everybody take it because we can pay for it and have them take it, and we'll get 100% taking it and take time out of class, and then we'll be at 100%. But they're not going, or they're not prepared. So I just think that's a strange thing to use. Those that just take a test means that they're prepared for post-secondary. That doesn't.
But you get 100 points on the MSIP because everybody took it.
Because they're seeing that
That's-
is just
that
a
makes
strange.
a big
I mean, I know, like Rhonda said, if we included Compass and ASVAB and some of the others, that would give us a better percent here of who actually took tests who are considering post-secondary. But that still doesn't mean they're prepared, because if they take the compass and go in 050, they're not really prepared for college work. So I think, as we look at that, there's some things we can do locally to give us a better idea of are they prepared, and then work with the state, because actually even enrolled, if they enrolled, does that mean they stayed? I think for us to focus on some of the things they're wanting us to, I understand the MSEP 5 and all the state rules, but we're really still not focusing on, we want them to be prepared to be successful at that level, not just taking a test to go in. So
that's really what the superintendents and MASA, that's been their complaint, is that we really need to bring more value to the outcome, other than just putting a mark down saying
Put
they
the
took
mark
test.
down.
So we're having those conversations with Desi on that.
Because we can play their game.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
and
we
everybody
let's
is.
just give Rhonda some money and say we're going to take time out of class and we'll make everybody take the test, and then we'll be okay. But we're still not. I mean, I really don't think that's what we're trying to do. So we've got to kind of balance what we're trying to do as a district with what somebody else is requiring to give us a number.
One of the things that I'd just like to respond to that, which I agree with you, on the test, just taking the test does not make you college ready. But there is a lot of good information that students can get from taking the test. And I think if you use it as a tool and a counseling tool and a resource for them, it does help them see what their future could look like or might look like. If they take it early enough in high school, it can also help with planning what they need for the next year as far as math and language arts, scheduling. So there's some value in that from that perspective. But the reason it's reported as it is here, obviously, is because that's what MSIP 5 is asking us to report, and we are using that at this point in time. The other thing I think that it's important to remember about the graduate follow-up survey, and I wanted to respond to Mrs. Cowan on that, that's one of the most difficult tasks that we have to get accurate information. We can use the information from the Clearinghouse, which is a national, but again, you really have to go through that with a fine-tooth comb, because it has students listed in a variety of places, and we don't really know where they ended up, so it's not a true measure. The other issue is when we do our own follow-up survey, the response is not good for that, and sometimes that percentage may not be totally accurate, so we need to work on that.
What would our unique challenges be in Springfield versus other districts? I mean, it seems like that would be a common
It is
issue.
a common, in any meetings I've been in, it is across the board, and so we're looking at several different options that may or may not work, but we're discussing that to see if we can make a better judgment about how many we actually have.
Go ahead, Dr. Frederick.
One quick question. Your key opportunities for improvement. Number 2, continued increased counselor support. And then you have your next steps that you're going to review data. When will we get that information? In other words, I would be interested in having that before we have our budget discussions. So is that something you're planning to do short term and have that information for us when we look at budgets, or next year?
Yes, Dr. Hackenworth and I are going to be meeting very shortly to discuss what our needs are, what the needs still are in many of our schools, and I'm going to take a look at not only our student counselor ratio, but also what kinds of needs we're seeing in the schools in terms of counselor response, or that would be needed for counselor response, and then bring that before you or before cabinet and let them bring it.
Okay, so although we're not seeing that you're specifically asking for a certain number of counselors, but we can expect that we will see that in the future on budget requests.
Well, I don't know what my supervisor will do with that, but I'm hoping that's the case.
Okay, any other questions?
Quick question.
Last one.
The time on task, that's a self-report of what they're spending their time doing, is that correct?
Well, it's really, it is self-reported, that's true, but they do actually keep 5 days each semester. They have a log that they keep that is a document from DESE where they mark every single task each 15 minutes that they're doing and put it in the category that you see listed there.
I would be correct in saying that our counselors spend 5 times as much time in high school on system support than they do in guidance and curriculum.
Yes. Yes.
Should be a red flag right there.
Yeah, I mean, and then you go down to the 12th graders taking the ACT and graduates. I mean, it seems like there's a clear connection between. It almost goes back to that issue of whether or not we want to start splitting academic counselors from behavioral or and maybe have a scheduling person that helps with scheduling, because it doesn't seem that we're able to be as intentional as we need to be on college and career readiness.
Good observation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have school police with Mr. Tom Tucker.
How come you're not in uniform?
Too many meetings today. Good evening. Glad to come and visit with you this evening. First of all, what I'd like to do is look over here, our key strengths. We have 2 highlighted. We did receive funding last year for our tasers for our officers. That included the training where everybody was tased to be able to carry the weapon.
Did anybody get tased?
Everybody did, yes. I'm just glad that we don't have to do that with a firearm. So,
Absolutely.
For the board.
You're asking for
For the
board
board.
volunteers?
no doubt. But that's an important tool that I felt like was really missing from our intermediate opportunities as far as a police officer, and some of the people that not our kids at school generally, but a lot of the people that come to our ball games and activities and show up after school and those kind of things. It just gives our officers one more tool to be able to effectively handle situations without them being injured or injuring the other party. We also would like to say received 2 patrol cars, which has helped us to catch up with our fleet. We kind of had a problem, a lag time in the fleet where we were replacing 1 car every year. And so when we have 13 patrol cars, we just can't quite keep up. So that helps us jump back up there a little bit. We also received a 9-month officer, which is we're very thankful for. We just now have that young man on board. He will be actually working at Hickory Hills and at Pleasant View, and he will actually go out into the school next week. He was just hired here a couple of weeks ago, came to us from Greene County. We also had a little bit of turnover earlier this year. We didn't anticipate any, but we had 2 officers leave, which is really pretty highly unusual for us. But one officer had an opportunity to go to Ozark, be a school police officer down there 5 minutes away from his house, so that was kind of a no-brainer. He took that. And the other gentleman is working to become a chaplain in the military reserve, so he left and had an opportunity to work at the VA hospital in Kansas City. So he left and went there. So we hired the other officers. We hired an assistant fire chief who has retired from the city of Springfield. He's working at Central, and the other officer we hired is retired from SPD, came from the training division for the last 6 or 7 years, has a world of experience. And right above that, on number 2, we talked last year just a little bit about our training and the opportunities and things. With the training that Wayne will bring to our department, plus right this week we have 2 officers in defensive training to become instructors. It won't be much longer till we're going to have our own cadre of officers in-house, so we won't have to be paying for training outside house, so we can go and start looking at some of the things that are going on, social media events and those kind of things, technologies and things. So we think that's a good thing. We're still under the opportunities for improvement. We're still looking for some extra supervision at our secondary schools. Right now, we still have 4 schools that do not have a dedicated officer at the middle school level. And we would like to obviously have 4 more 9-month officers, and that would give us an officer at every middle school and then the 2 officers at every high school. So we're going to continue to work for that and look for that. The ALICE program, we continue to implement that and roll that out to the schools. We are doing that on professional development days. We have pared the program back from an 8-hour program to a 2-hour program and delivering that to staffs. We're doubling up sometimes in schools, having a school come and visit another school and providing that for the staff members. We also, under the number 4 and 5 there, talked about a secondary location for our dispatch center. I think we may have a glimmer of hope for an opportunity. We've been talking to the 911 Greene County Emergency Management Center folks, and they have told us that there would be at least an opportunity for a secondary dispatch center there where we could set up our computers for alarms and stuff if we had to switch over and had to leave Boonville. So that's a good thing. That's something we've been looking for. So as I said, we have 11 sessions of the ALICE program scheduled between now and the end of the school year. So, and I believe that's all I have. Is there any questions?
Are there any questions, Mr. Tucker? Mr. Lee?
Would you talk a little bit about, since that was the last thing you talked about, the ALICE program and basically intruder training that we do, and do we do any simulations? Do we do with our staff or even with our students if something were to happen in the schools? I mean, just talk a little bit about the training that you actually do on specifically intruder situations.
We require our schools to have 3 intruder drills a year, and they go through that. Generally, the first one's announced to everyone, time, place, and that kind of thing. Teachers have the opportunity to talk with the students and explain what they need to do during an intruder drill and stuff. The second drill we have, the staff and the principal administrators naturally will know, but they will call that. The students won't know, and it's kind of a reaction to see how the students are going to react and if our process is going to work properly. The third one is generally the administrator will call unannounced and lets us test all of our processes that we have to make sure everything is going to work out and work okay. For the most part, it does. The ALICE program itself gives us a little different opportunity. Right now, our lockdown program, or excuse me, our intruder training program involves a lockdown. And that's just simply where we lock the doors, turn the lights off, get everybody out of the vision of the doors and windows as much as we can and those kind of things. And it's that's good. That's a place to start. But what we're doing is we're not allowing our staff that are in those classrooms and protecting those kids in a lot of cases, giving them any ownership in a program that may save their lives or kids' lives. And so with the ALICE program, it takes it a step farther, and there's a component which is the evacuation component. For example, if you have an isolated situation, say at Glendale High School in the main office, you could evacuate the 3 floors of classrooms on the north end of the building and much of the rest of the building without ever affecting that area in front. And so you're removing a lot of the potential damage and targets and stuff from an active shooter event or an intruder. And so that's kind of in a nutshell what the ALICE program is, but it also talks about things you need to look for in your room, how to maybe barricade your doors, what's something to tie it off maybe, those kind of things, how to protect yourself. I've talked to, I have 3 young ladies that we go to church with that they've graduated, and now all 3 are working in Springfield Public Schools. And I was talking to them as they were going through school. I said, well, what kind of emergency management training do you receive as a teacher? Is there any kind of preparation? And they all 3 said that there's just almost non-existent as far as what they receive. And we need to empower our teachers that they have the right to survive and the right to help our kids survive and be able to get out if that's what needs to be done.
Any other questions? We appreciate what you and your officers do in keeping 25,000 students and over, 3,000 staff safe, and what you do in the community, too. Thank you. Okay, moving on to, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, we're
So, the second part of the cycle in OSRs is the full report, and then the state of the district that all programs do. They look at the celebration and challenges of each one, their biggest celebration, biggest challenge, to report that. So all of the programs you can get a look at in 6 pages to see the biggest things that are happening in the district. This is 2 of 3 documents that each program lead will prepare. The other one is 6 months from the time that they come to you, they'll prepare a status report. So a lot of the questions that you've asked will be responded to in that status report. So if you have any questions, I will pull it up.
Are
or
there any
comments.
questions of Ms. Palmer?
It is a lot of information.
Really good, though.
Yep.
Good snapshot.
Is there a way in board docs that this could be captured and kept in, like, each of these kept in like one folder or something, so that if we want to go back and just look at all of them in one place, we won't have to go through each meeting? Okay.
That's what your plan is, isn't it?
Yes.
I know we're going to use it that way as well, cabinet.
Anything specific? Any questions?
You take your pointer, and you click on that stated thing and pull it over to your screen, it'll be there. That makes sense. Click and drag, and you can put it on the blue screen, so it's always there.
Oh, I see. It can be on this computer. Okay, yeah. I'm just like if I'm at home or something.
I need
Yeah.
a new computer for that.
Just,
All right. Anything else, Ms.
just one
Palmer?
comment, too, that the board's
After
not
this.
on here. We will be
Yeah.
at some point, but we're not
We're
yet.
getting
We're
there.
not there yet.
Okay.
So the final for tonight is differentiated ongoing systems review, which is a response to the Board of Education feedback that the number of presentations that you have are excessive, and wanting to keep the focus directly impacting student achievement and also allow for deeper discussion. So the proposal that I'm bringing forward tonight, along with Cabinet, is differentiated levels. So the first one is Tier 1. Cabinet would review all programs every year. All the documents will still be prepared for Cabinet and the board. Status reports also will be prepared for Cabinet and the board, and the presentations will be every year. Tier 2, the first 3 bullets are the same, with the exception of presentations being every other year. Tier 3, the first 3 are the same, with the exception being if you request a program lead to come and present their OSR, then that could be done. So to look at Tier 1, 2, and 3, all the programs are listed. The ones that have the check marks are the ones that have gone already to the board with have the check marks. Some of them have been to Cabinet, but not to the board. We're in process with some. So to show you what that would look like visually with colors, Tier 1, 2, and 3. So Tier 1 presentations would be every year, Tier 2 every other year, Tier 3, and the green would be as requested.
And how are those determined?
Those are determined from the ones that have the closest impact to student achievement. So the proposal was brought to Cabinet, and Cabinet gave their feedback, and this is a result of those conversations.
Quite a bit of arm twisting.
I guess just without having a lot of time to think about this, I would think that financial services would be probably something we'd want to, I mean, at least from my perspective, look at more than as requested, but considering the financial and fiscal responsibility is one of the board's main responsibilities, so. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I'd like to make a proposal that the board have an opportunity to look at these, each of these categories, and perhaps we could provide feedback on how we would want to see those, and then we could send that to you.
Absolutely.
And then maybe make some adjustments.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Right, yeah, I think that's the easiest thing to do, is just review this, compare the colors and the tiers to the frequency of when we would get information. Just make sure that you feel comfortable with that. I like the streamlining. I think there just may be a little bit of tweaking, so.
Yeah.
system.
What?
I like the system.
Yeah,
I like-
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Joe,
Thank you.
work.
Okay, moving on to section 7, items for separate consideration. Dr. Ritter?
Dr. Harrell, please.
Oh, there we go.
This is needing to be voted on before the first of the year by law. Please.
Good evening. Yes, the board has before it's signed for the first reading policy JHG, which is investigating of child abuse and neglect. This is a two-pronged situation. We have not yet adopted the MSBA policy as whole, and the MSBA policy has made some revisions that do have to be put into place, as Dr. Ritter said, prior to January 1. So this is both an acceptance of the current MSBA policy and then with the revisions is what you're looking at. The primary changes from what we're doing is a little bit more specificity with the training and then some reporting connections that were a little bit deeper than what we had in our current policy. There's no fiscal impact.
Are there any questions of Dr. Harrell? So we can vote on this next month, right? No?
Yeah, we can vote in December.
In December.
Like,
We didn't get the information on this until just last week. Otherwise, we would have brought it for first reading and study session. But the fact that it has to be done by January 1, we had to bring it for a vote at the regular meeting in order to get our GPs.
Right.
So we'll have
okay.
the second.
So is there a motion?
Oh, I see. Okay.
So move.
Yes.
Or second?
Second.
Okay, but do I have the motion in front of me? Well, okay.
Action item. The board approved policy.
Yep.
JHG.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That the board that the motion's been made by Dr. Prater, seconded by Mr. Lee, that the board approves the Board of Education policy JHG, reporting and investigating child abuse neglect for first reading. Thanks. Mr. Everest.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, and Dr. Ritter. The action item before you is the fiscal year 13 audit. I'm happy to announce that for the 21st year in a row, we have received an unqualified audit. An unqualified audit means that the district met all standards of accounting principles generally accepted in the U.S. It should also be noted that less than 3% of the school districts in the state of Missouri use the accrual basis of accounting and are thus in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. Al Kirchhoffer, president of Daniel Jones & Associates, will provide a brief presentation concerning the audit and will be available for questions.
Good evening. As John mentioned, my name is Al Kirchhoffer. I'm the president of Daniel Jones & Associates. I'm here before you to present your audit report for the 2013 school year. I want to thank you for the opportunity to let us do the audit. We enjoyed working with the staff, and I also want to thank John and Steve for their cooperation. The audit's divided up in 3 parts. A financial part, which John had mentioned. You've got an unmodified opinion, which is the highest possible opinion you could receive. We also look at the state side. We're supposed to look at attendance, transportation, and budgetary compliance. All 3 of those areas were complied with. We found no instance of noncompliance. And the last part is federal programs. Because the district receives and spends over $500,000, they're required to have what they call an A133 audit. During our testing, we noted no discrepancies, no question cost, and related to the federal programs. We had no disagreement with management, and everything we requested, they have provided for us in a timely manner. As always, the district continues to be financially prudent and is a modeled school district for financial stewardship. Overall, as I told you before, the school gets an A+. Any questions?
Are there any questions? So 21st year in a row?
Yeah, I wish you guys could go to St. Louis and help a couple districts up there. I won't name any names.
I know there's in the news right now, there's a couple, news about attendance issues. Is this the type of thing that you were auditing?
Yes, we look at a various number of things: attendance, transportation. The information that we request is about 9 pages of information, single-spaced. If I stack our work papers up, they'd be about 3 feet tall. To go ahead and do 71 pages to get this report.
So if a district was in the news about attendance discrepancies, it'd be this kind of audit that would have captured
Correct. Yeah, we do analytics. Since attendance is the last probably 7 to 8 years has gone electronic, it's been a little bit harder to test because in the past we'd go back to the teacher record books, and now you really can't do that because it's all electronic. So for districts, some districts that are really dependent on attendance for financial purposes, such as charter schools, there's a motive there to go ahead and, say, cook the books on that data because they're getting a large source of revenue.
All right, any other questions? We appreciate your work on
Thank
our
you.
behalf. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Been moved by Mr. Lee, seconded by Dr. Prater, that the board approves the 2012-2013 audit as prepared by Daniel Jones and Associates Certified Public Accountants.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to the treasurer's report.
Executive session.
Thank you. If you would please look at the financial statement. This is for October 2013. Property tax collections, they are down year to date about $700,000. As I've mentioned in prior months, the bulk of the money comes in December and January, so hopefully nothing to be concerned about as of this time. We did get the November information in, and it was actually within $1,000 of last November. So we will be heading into December about $700,000 down on property tax collections. Sales tax, we are year-to-date up about $222,000 or 3.3%. Our budget included an increase of about 1.5%, so we're tracking better than budget so far this year. Overall, our revenue is at 15.8% at the end of October versus 18% last year, so a little bit behind, but nothing to indicate that we will not catch up. Total expenditures, they are at 20.68% through October versus 22.74% for last year. That's good information. Even better is you'll note that the total salaries and benefits is at 19.2% versus 19.8% last year. That's an important number because salary and benefits, they have to be budget. They can actually exceed budget. That's one of the few items that can exceed budget because you have to pay people for their work. And say, for example, we hire someone with more experience than the person they replace, then they might come in at a higher salary. And speaking of which, if you would look at the budget transfers page, for the first time you'll see a significant number of budget transfers. On the revenue side, the big numbers are the $370,000 in other revenue. This is money coming in from the foundation for our annual turf or Healthy Place to Play payment. We also had about $1 million special ed adjustment, and that adjustment was also on the expenditure side, so it had no impact on fund balance. And then you'll see the $3.4 million, which is the anticipated total cost for the purchase and an update to the transportation center, and there's a similar amount in expenditures, so that also at this time does not have an impact on fund balance. The rest of the transfers on the expenditure side are pretty much what we call the annual salary spread. We go through and because, as I mentioned, we might hire people at a higher rate than their predecessor. Mr. Tucker mentioned earlier this evening that we had budgeted for a 9-month police officer, and he just hired that person. So there was a few months where that person was not hired, so that money's adjusted as well. Any questions?
Are there any questions, Mr. Lee?
Down 700 with property tax and total revenue down a little bit. Usually this time we're approving an anticipation note to see, just in case we don't make it through December. Is that not, I mean, you think you're optimistic that we're not going to need that this year?
I'm very optimistic. Mr. Everest and Mr. Wells, our cash and investments manager, have put pencil to paper and indicate that we will not need a tax anticipation note this year.
Mr. Hosmer?
How troubling is the sales tax dip, if at all? October to October last year?
At this time, I think it's just a 1-month blip. I'm not anticipating a trend there.
According to what, yeah. According to the state reports.
Questions? Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Dr. Frederick, seconded by Dr. Prater, that the board approves the treasurer's report as presented.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to routine action items. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Oh, dismiss. Whoops.
The
Who you waiting
computer.
on?
Me, I think this time.
Now, you could say
All
that now, can't you? Sure.
It's done.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the routine action items?
Yes, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Dr. Prater, seconded by Mr. Lee, that the board approves each of the routine action items as submitted. Okay, is there a motion to approve the general consent items?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hosmer. Is there a second? A second? Okay.
Just want to be in the scorebook,
It's been
didn't you?
moved by Mr. Hosmer, seconded by Dr. Frederick, that the board approves each recommendation submitted by the administration in the general consent items. Section 10 outlines the information items that we received at the study session, that very complete and good study on net zero. Are there any public comments to address non-agenda items? Mrs. Luton. Okay. Then we'll move on to comments from the board. Is there anything under legislative?
We had Sonia Anderson visit Williams today. That was a great visit.
Great.
Again, she's been there about every month.
Fantastic. And with
That's awesome.
Representative Long, anything else?
ETA had their legislative, can't remember which day it was, that Wednesday.
Weeks ago, yeah.
Representative Noor was the only one that showed as far as the actual, which we didn't anticipate McCaskill or Blunt or Long, but the only local rep that showed up. A little disappointed in that. Senator Dixon sent somebody. His chief of staff was there, but it would have been nice to have some of the other ones.
Yes.
Also,
address
the only
some of
rep to vote against House Bill 253. So,
You got
And can we have a refresh, a reminder of when the legislative reception is? Is that December 16th? That's
16th.
Monday at 4? Okay, great.
My kids first, I'm going to have, 4 legislators? Yeah, so if you would like to come and join us for that, that's going to be on the 10th of December at 9 o'clock. And the group wanted to have a conversation with the legislators to kind of impress on them all the different needs of families and children. So, and that will be, where's that at? I can't remember. Oh, it's right here. Right next
Dr.
door.
Ritter. Moving on to future issues. I have a couple things. It's quite likely in December, because of the timing of bids and the timing of our meeting, that we are going to have a very short special meeting, say first thing in the morning, either on the 19th or the 20th. That's a Thursday or a Friday. Like if we would to like a 7:30, is that too early?
Friday I can do.
Fridays are better for you? The 20th?
Coffee and bagels.
I don't think you'd even need to give us that.
Bagels.
Yeah, you're talking about
Friday
like
morning?
Friday morning, is that the 20th? Is that a Friday?
Yes.
Just, I'm thinking 15 minutes. Mr. Wendt, is that about what it would take to approve a bid? Or not approve a bid, depending on what it is? Okay, I'll have Mrs. Luton send that out then. The other thing goes back to a discussion around the superintendent search, and our consultants are asking us to identify a much smaller group of constituents that would meet with them, or would meet with the finalist or the finalists when they come to Springfield for an on-site visit. I'm not quite sure why they need these groups identified as early in the process as possible, but they've asked us to do it. So from the 17 different forums we had over the past 2 days, they've recommended that the groups would be administrators and principals, certified staff, non-certified staff, an outside group like the Community Leadership Forum and the diverse community group that was together, and then a public meet and greet, which would be open to the community. And it's my understanding how these work, is, if I remember during our interview of McPherson and Jacobson, is that these are much smaller groups. They're by invitation, and that each of these groups would select a chair and co-chair that would facilitate that particular discussion. Is that right, Mrs. Luton? So, and they've asked us to limit those groups to 5 or 6. So, does anybody see any problem with the ones that they've proposed? So again, it's administrators, principals, certified staff, and non-certified staff, or support. Community group, which would also include the business, the Community Leadership Forum, and the diverse community, and then an open forum, which would take into account parents and teachers. And I think that would include everybody that we included in these initial forms. Yeah, Andy.
Are these the groups that would then provide
Feedback.
the little envelopes that we would get that we could look at before we made our decision? Is that the idea?
Yep. Mm-hmm. But it'd be much smaller, and it would be, so do people feel comfortable that that would be?
I guess my thought is I think it's incredibly important that our elected teacher organization is one of those groups by itself, and whoever they choose to have in that meeting that be one of those groups. I think that is incredibly important.
Well, they wouldn't be choosing who was in it. I mean, we would be.
It'd be part of the certified staff.
It'd be part of the certified staff.
I understand, but if we go to the diverse community, I'm assuming we're not going to handpick the people that would come from that group, correct? Or
I'm not sure how that works. Well, there'd probably be an invitation to NAACP. There'd be an invitation to chamber. I'm not really.
We let the chamber then decide who would come in that
I'm not
meeting.
sure we have to I think. So you're proposing that NEA would have a separate session beyond the certified staff?
Teacher representatives, they would figure out who's going to be there, however many people are going to be there. I guess go back to our teachers voted that group to represent them. I'd like for that group to sit in on the finalists and give us an opinion. I think that's vitally important to this process.
I guess I have a problem with that because I don't think that particular group was, they were elected to collectively bargain for the district or for the teachers. So, I don't think there'd be any we wouldn't be excluding them from this process, but I think that having certified staff there and having, having a cross-section of teachers, no matter who their
So we're gonna pick the
affiliation
staff?
with. No, but I mean, there's, Dr. Ritter has a teacher forum, right? That there's a representative from every school. I don't know what their affiliation is. I don't know, but.
I guess I still don't quite understand the process there. I mean, I understand what groups they're talking about, but I don't understand who then determines from that group who's going to be at the meeting to meet with the finalists. Who will determine how? Because if you just list one of them there, I mean, who will determine? Because it's not, that last one is a catch-all. So that would be the student group, and it'd be any of those that came to the community group. So would it? Let's
do it this way. Let's wait till the 10th when we meet with them. I can't imagine that there's a need in 3 weeks to have that figured out for what we're going to do in February. So let's wait until they're here.
I'm just not quite understanding what they've done in the past and what's worked in the past and who's making those choices. And I mean, I kind of understand the concept, which I like.
And they were very clear that this was just input. It wasn't people feeling like they had a vote on who this was. So I guess I would feel more comfortable just having that face-to-face discussion with them, what they've done in the past, how they've handled, representation.
I think that's, the reason I voted against this group is because I think they are almost too in control of the process, and I think we need to be the ones who set the parameters. And I think waiting until they're here and we can question them face to face is important. I don't want to see them hijacking this process to get their cookie cutter.
Yeah.
The other thing, the other thing about that is that the questions that they would be asking would be questions developed by you, the board.
Right. Okay. Right. So it's not it's not that individual group deciding what they want to ask. It's those questions being asked on our behalf. Okay, but I still think there's enough uncertainty on how this works that it would be helpful. I mean, that's why they're going to be here on the 10th to really go through this. So, yeah, go ahead.
I'd just kind of like to comment that I see these smaller groups as those individuals that will really be working closely with the new superintendent. And there will be, whether it's community, whatever it is, that they'll be working closely. So that's why, on one hand, I agree with what Mr. Hosmer had to say about our collective bargaining representatives, because they will be working hopefully, at the bargaining table with a new superintendent. And I do think that feedback may be a little more unique than what we might get from our general teacher population. So, but I do think that continuing discussion on that, we can come up with something, but.
Yeah, I would just say I think we've talked about this process being as inclusive as possible, and I would not want to set up a situation. I mean, we had a situation where, and we've been through this already with collective bargaining about certain teachers not being able to vote for. I think we need to control it to make sure it's as inclusive as possible, without excluding an important voice, and that's the representative group that's been elected to collectively bargain. So I think there's certainly a lot of room there to have a lot of people at the table, or have a representative group there. So
just to clarify, that would be in addition to, not an exclusion.
Okay, I'm going to.
Just one other comment. I think, at least what I understood from their presentation and what I liked about it, is these were groups that had kind of a unified purpose, business, diverse community, special needs, whatever students, they kind of had a vision of what they wanted for the district. And what I liked about that process is it gave us that input from those groups that had kind of a unified vision as to what they thought about finalists, and we could do with that information what we wanted. There's obviously nothing that requires us to follow that, not follow that, take it into account, not take it into account. But when you diffuse it to, let's just put 20 people here and 20 people there and 20 people there, I don't know that you get, I don't know if you get that kind of feedback that I would want as a school board member. I'd like to know what the, a business community, for example, thinks of the finalists. But whether it make an impact, I don't know. But I'd like to know what NEA thinks about the finalists. I'd like to know what students think of the finalists. And I think if you just kind of, hit and miss and do 20 people that have completely different interests sitting there, then I don't know that you're going to get the input that I'd like to have as a board member. And that was that was kind of the interesting thing for me from that presentation.
Well, we can get that all sorted out with them on the 10th, so thank you. Anything else under other? Oh, or future issues?
Future.
Yeah,
I just wanted to update the board on something, and it won't take very long here, on a program that's being started. Some of us that have been through Leadership Springfield program, and Ms. Callan, who was helpful in putting the LIFT program for teachers. Dr. Hackenworth and Leadership Springfield is putting together a program called Principles in Leadership. Principles of Leadership, which is basically a leadership program for the principals. Our district principals, very similar to Leadership Springfield, get them out in the community. Because we've talked about getting them involved in Leadership Springfield, but you can't, when you've only got one slot or two maybe at the most, how long it'd take to get them all through. So this is more concentrated, focused solely on just the principals in Springfield Public Schools, at least in the pilot year. We're going to start it in January as a pilot program. Several elementary, 10 or 12 elementary principals will be involved to kind of get it kicked off, and it'll start full speed ahead in September. And it will be outside the public schools too. I mean, we're going to include other schools, not just SPS. I think it's going to be a really exciting program. It's very much targeted like Leadership Springfield with the different program days, once a month for several months. And Leadership Springfield, I know they've approved it and are involved as a partner with us to do that. And we'll do a lot of the training and coordination. But it's teachers that got involved. I don't know if you went through the LIFT program, and I couldn't remember if you did or not. It's just a great opportunity to get them out in the community and develop that partnership with the principals in their communities, in their neighborhoods, to just get out there and look for opportunities, and plus to develop leadership skills. And so that's coming up in January, and I'm sure there'll be more reports on that to do that. It's a pretty exciting program.
Great, thank you. Anything else under future or other? Andy?
I'd like for us to take another crack at getting as many polling places as we can in our schools. We talk about getting our legislators into our schools and how important that was, and I think is. I thought it was very important that Congressman Long was in our schools, because no matter what you think about schools, until you walk the halls and see the schools, you don't know if you haven't been there in 20 years, 25 years. I provided some people on the board the results of a study showing, not surprisingly, a significant increase in the number of people voting for school issues that vote in schools. So you think, well, that's good. So I know we talked about this before with Mr. Struckoff, and there were some logistical issues, but I think there's just all sorts of good to come out of it in terms of curriculum around democracy with kids during the voting day, and I think just the self-interest of of having our patrons in our schools to see the good, but also what needs repair and what needs maintenance, and just how packed they are. So I'd like us to have that conversation again, to try to get as many as we can back into our schools as possible.
Is that a decision we would make, or, I mean,
Yeah,
he makes that, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does, but we can encourage.
Well, but I understood from the last time was that he actively looks for places, and we in the past have said we're not that interested because we've got all sorts of logistical problems when you vote here,
Right.
parking and people in the building and all these other things. And so as a result, we've gone out to a lot of churches and a lot of other places, and I think that you cut your nose off to spite your face when you pull voters out of schools and then you ask them for a bond issue to give money to the schools.
Seems like that would be a multidimensional kind of discussion with operations, safety, not just
Principles.
seems like there need to be a more comprehensive discussion than just, because I would like to hear, we used to have more polling places in schools. What was the decision and the reason to take them out? I'd like there to be some, I'd like us to have that information before we would go to him and say, let's bring them back.
Oh, I'd just like to have a discussion sometime in the future. Somebody come to us and talk about pros and cons and whether it's viable.
Okay.
Maybe he's going to tell you it's not viable. Can't
Like
do
an
it.
information item. Okay.
Got it.
Right. You
Can we
received
talk
the.
about what I just handed out? But
Can we-
1 minute. We won't talk about
All right.
it. No, we're not going to talk about it tonight. I just want to tell you
Okay.
what it is. So,
Okay.
as the board OSR, Ms. Bush and Ms. Palmer, we talked about one of the key success measures was defining a data process for decision making and helping us make decisions based on data. What you have here is just sort of a process, some guiding questions to talk about at a later date, give you some time to look at them and think about them. As we think about our decisions that we make and as we're going through our agenda items and things like that, of questions as we do OSRs, what's an important question to ask? It's just a guideline. It's helping put the process together of formalizing a data decision-making process. And so we'd be happy to any input, feedback that you'd have as we put this thing together to do that. Not tonight, but at some point. So I didn't want to just hand it out and give it to you without some explanation of what it is.
The other thing is, at the strategic discussion in December is going to focus on preliminary budget discussions, and so anything that you want included in that discussion, you'll need to have. How do we decide to do that, Denise? Was it going to come right to? Was it going to come to you? I can't remember.
That would be fine. I think that's kind of what.
Okay, that's what I thought we had decided. Any data points that you want included in that discussion, send those to Dr. Frederick, probably within the next week or so, right? Dr. Ritter, you're looking over. Right.
Yeah, well, I was just checking my data point to see.
Right,
And
that's what we had talked about, right? To make sure that the information that's included in that presentation and discussion is what the board needs and wants.
Forward that to us, and then we can always.
Yeah.
That's what I.
That's what,
That's
but
what I-
just have a collecting point here from the board's perspective and then get it to you.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I.
And that's on the 10th, is that our meeting?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And that will make sure that we have a rich discussion and a productive discussion. And this is something the board's been pushing for a while, so I think it will be good. Just remember to do your plus deltas, and we do need to go into executive session. So is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is that you, Mr. Okay. So moved by Dr. Prater, seconded by Mr. Renner, that the board meets in executive session to discuss legal and personnel matters as provided in section 610.021, 13, and 13 RSMO.
Happy Turkey.